You are listening to the audiobook Veilshatter, Legends of Elyndar, now available on Amazon, Audible, and wherever books are sold. Featuring our three unforgettable heroes, an epic adventure begins.
Awakening on the ramparts. Veyran stood atop the wind-bitten ramparts of Windrest, as dawn dragged its pale fingers across an iridescent sky. The thunderclouds bruised lavender and silver where they hugged the city's jagged spires. The world above and below was fractured light, shifting currents, a geometry written in weather, mutable and uncertain. Here, where the tower's sky-glass teeth cut against the coming morning, he watched the waking city as if it might divulge the shape of his future in the curling breath of each cloud. He pressed his palm to the cool stone, slick with dew and charged with static from the night's passing gales. Beneath his touch, the slab vibrated with the city's soul, voices rising from the market piazza, the distant hum of sky trams tethered for repair, children in the lower terraces shrieking at the wild crackle of the dawn's first wind. All of it threaded through his senses with familiar ache and yearning. Yet today, beneath that keen surface, a wrongness pulsed, an unfamiliar counterpoint to Windrest's melody, dissonant as a dropped note or a memory out of place. His own memories stalked him, half-formed and gnawing at the edges of thought. In dreams, Uthara's islands drowned one by one, thunder smashing against stone as the skies yawned open to swallow light and air alike. He saw once solid plateaus buckling, their anchors shattered, as spectral rain swept cities from the world's edge into fathomless blue. He startled awake, heart-pounding, Zephrason's name on his lips, a cry snatched away by the morning wind. He had not truly slept since. Down below, the city stretched in layered terraces, geometry determined by wind and history, and centuries of bitter accident. Rooftops gleamed with sky glass, clear as pond ice just before fracturing, which flexed with the pressure of encroaching storms. Windrest had never been merely stone stacked atop floating rock. It was a maze knotted by centuries of weatherbinder's will, flux and tension coiled in every crossing arch and weather vane. Each dawn, street vendors chased the night's residue with fresh sigils, and this morning the market's flagstones still bore yesterday's heartline runes. Looped, careful, already scabbing with the dust of exhausted magic. Veyran's eyes caught on a pair of market children leaping puddles in the cold light, carrying lightweight braziers covered in protective glyphs, their voices tangled upward. For a moment he envied their ease. They were the city's true future, forged in the new world's uncertainties. He tasted the charge of word-binding in the shifting air, the aftermath of a night full of weather work and nerve. But his own connection to such forces, innate as blood or breath, felt ragged, muddied by guilt and exhaustion. The city stirred restlessly beneath a watchful storm. Fast-moving knots of drizzle washed chalked wards from lintels, superstition prompting every door to bristle with salt and moonwater, spoonfuls glinting at battered thresholds. From the steepled walkways, merchants cursed the weather, faces pinched as they tried to reset wards against echo memories. Somewhere, a cluster of glass rights in the artisan caste argued over spilled soul dust and the price of last autumn's blown mirrors. The memory of the night of mawing mirrors had left the city haunted, always listening for hunger in a reflection. Veyran's shoulders ached where his sky cloak settled, cloud silk damp with morning, and stitched with thin runic thread. He drew it tighter, folding the shimmering cloth over his chest as if he could bar entry to the chill or to the past. Today, the wind gusted cold from the north, smelling faintly of brine and the copper tang of distant lightning. His power ran thin, the well of his will muddied by half-remembered warnings. Never call the sky when the storm is watching. Never let longing become command. Zephrasson whispered to him sometimes, even in daylight, on lonely heights, in the hush before thunder broke. The spirit's voice was a prickle along his jaw, the scent of ozone braided with longing and dread. This morning, Zephryson's absence unsettled him almost as much as their presence ever did, a too quiet hush, like the city breathing shallow to avoid rousing a sleeping god. You walk boundary lines, Veyran, fated foolishness or necessary ruin. He stared into the whipping clouds, searching for shapes, omens perhaps. The floating archipelagos drifted gently at the upper edges of vision. Blue-green islands threaded together by bridges of sky glass and suspensor steel, the veins and arteries of Uthira's airbound heart. From here, windress thunder plateaus fanned outward, their underbellies veiled in storm. Sometimes, flashes of movement below marked the journey of stone-wrought behemoths migrating through the darkness. Sometimes, wind whales breached, leaving arcs of spray that glimmered above the city's shadow wells. But beneath this majesty, something far stranger moved, a sibilant current, heavy as thunder but silent where it curled. The city's usual pulses, commerce, weather trials, laughter, were all slightly off-kilter. Peering east toward Candle Quarter, he saw flickers of runes guttering blue and gold, burning wrong atop slate roofs. Someone had tried to reinforce the perimeter overnight, but their glyphs sputtered like failing beacons. There had been rumors already, spirit bridges thinned by unseasonal wind, outlanders vanishing at dusk, echoes of words spoken backwards and catching like hooks beneath the eaves. Veyran drew a careful breath, pressed calloused fingers to the hollows below his eyes. The old ache flared, shame over choices made, laws bent, kin left behind. What mercy exists outside tradition? Even here, alone in the clouds, he could taste a ruined scorn, see the withering disappointment in every sky-ring elder's glance. But that was not all he carried. There was still the promise. Ours is the keeping of the storm's heart. Ours the grief if it breaks. Duty weighed heavier in the sharp air. His focus tool, a weatherbinder's rod, kept in storm glass and banded with oath silver, leaned at his side. It hummed quietly, as if sensing his unsteadiness. Magic in Uthira was not a thing of light and simple will. The sky took its price. To summon storm from clear air-drained bone and sinew demanded exacting oaths, and sometimes left the weatherbinder light-eyed for days, wandering the memory of rain. His own reserves were dangerously frayed from too many nights of binding pressure and coaxing calm. The elders warned, draw too deep, and what you call down may not be the sky at all. Thunder cracked to the southeast, lightning scoring the horizon in a sharp, unnatural line. Veyran stiffened. This surge did not bear his signature, nor any pattern he'd learned among the sky ring. It came jagged, pulse wrong, riding unpredictable turns that left the air sharp and metallic on his tongue. His heart beat double quick, old training surging up, catalog, anchor, assess for threat. He sent out the barest thread of wetmagi, a seeking pulse that unfurled from his mind, riding the salt-buried lines inscribed beneath the city's skin. The answering feedback was sickening. The air along Windrest's eastern flank twisted. The old sigils failed to brace the winds. A current as oily and black as spilled dreams slid beneath his consciousness, a taint he recognized with dread. Mirror magic, twisted memories, bound to storm. Sudden grief threatened to unman him, not for the city's peril, though that press of fear was real, but for the way this taint reminded him how close disaster always lay to hope. Last year, on a dawn much like this, he'd failed to anchor the stones when Zephrysson called lightning uncontrolled. That mad surge had nearly shattered a market tier, left 3 common folk scorched and shivering, eyes lit with the blue of someone else's memory. Guilt had refused to drown since then. It clung, no matter how many sunrises he endured atop these cold walls. He shook off the recollection, jaw set. Down in the avenues, merchant banners snapped and curled, their sigils flaring violet, then dimming. Someone was overreaching, drawing weather they could not price. Panic would soon ripple through the sky ring, the council sensitive to the subtlest imbalance, especially with Arun Keln's nose for treachery and his faith in tradition's cruel clarity. The wind veered, sudden and sharp. With it came the shadow of a voice. No sound, merely sensation. Pins and frost at the back of his tongue. Zephrison. He was certain of it, as intimately as breath or regret. For a brittle instant, Veyran let the spirit brush the edges of his mind, aching to hear guidance or challenge, but the impression left only a bitter tang. Rain struck, stinging and wild, before any proper preparation could be called. The drops spat from the heavens, impossibly cold for late spring, a deluge that smothered conversation and forced city folk to duck into shadowed stalls, sky trams groaning against wet rails. Atop the rampart, water sluiced down Veyran's cloak and into the runes cut along the stone. He clenched his fists, feeling magic thread through his veins, the instinct to command the air battling the exhaustion crouched in his chest. He could have eased the rain, might have woven a barrier to buy the city time. But even the idea drew lead into his limbs. Last night's overdraw of wet McGee still echoed, fatigue a stone behind his eyes, and sparks of phantom heat leaping under his skin. To call on the sky again would be to court collapse, and weakness now was a kind of beacon for all who circled the city's pain. Instead, he watched the storm flare and curl, a pattern emerging in the chaos, winds looping back upon themselves, echoing the rune lattice braided through the city's highest tier. Some rival power, likely the Eclipse thralls twisting the Mirror Knight's aftermath for their lord, wove this, a sorcery to blur the lines between memory and storm. Already Veyran sensed half-revealed shame feather along the city's edge, secrets close to surfacing, truths that Windrest would not survive exposed. He pressed his palm flat over the hilt of his weather rod and whispered a prayer, not to the Ordai faith or the keepers of the last echo, but to the raw storm itself, a plea for time, for a moment's reprieve. Each word ghosted up in Old Maruni, the language seldom spoken but shaped for commanding rain and mercy alike. Breath slowed, vision narrowed. Relief flickered, small, insufficient, but the damp city stilled, as if the storm itself listened. A familiar figure crested the spiral stairs, railings wet and slick from the torrent. Arun Keln, his rival, strode at the edge of Veyran's vision, cloud silk dressing stiff with runes, silvered hair bound back in the sky elf fashion. He moved less like a comrade than an oncoming censure. Arctelos, Arun called, voice laden with accusation and thunder. What curse have you drawn down now? Veyran straightened, feeling both the old antagonism and the weight of the eyes that would soon turn to him across Windrest. This wasn't mine, he replied, tone clipped. Arun's gaze swept the ramparts, lingering on the water pooling near their feet, the runes flickering on the sky-glass face above the archways. No, too wild for you. But you'll be blamed for it if you linger. A memory surged. Zephyrsin's laughter, bright and cruel, echoing in the place where duty warred with desire. For a heartbeat, Veyran saw the precarious paths ahead, acquiescence to tradition or defiance for the sake of a city, and a storm spirit he loved, each course riven with loss. They'll need answers, Arun continued, stance sharpening. If you're wise, you'll help me shape them. Veyran offered silence, gaze fixed eastward, past the cloud-veiled streets and the treacheries woken in the night. The storm pressed on, patient and unsparing. In its music, he heard another call, faint, insistent, a soul's echo far across the continent, harmonizing with the darkness swelling beneath Windrest's proud stones. Leora, perhaps, her name a fragile line of hope in the furthest distance, purpose gathered, slow and heavy as rain pooling in the city's scars. Veyran turned from Erun's challenge, not angered but resolved. The day would uncoil with knives beneath its beauty. Prophecy's cost demanded action. Fate pressed with hungry hands at his shoulders, a shadow asking what he would shelter, whom he would save. From the ramparts he drew a final breath, air thick with untold storms and the promise of heartbreak yet to come, and descended into Windrest's restless heart, where destiny and dusk waited to consume the unwary.